This week, it's all about big exits, big rounds, moonshots, and politics shaking venture capital. Snoonu gets acquired for $320 million by Jahez after raising only $17 million in only 2 rounds. Is Jahez overpaying to dominate Qatar? Or is Jahez outsmarting everyone in the food game? Husby raises $59 million to scale mortgages across the Middle East and Europe. Is Proptech the new FinTech? And beyond mortgages and listings, what other painful real estate problems are still unsolved and worth building for? From VR to AR to XR now, Expansio scores $250 million to put smart contact lenses in your eyes. With real-time computing, health tracking, and night vision, is MENA finally going all in on deep tech? And finally, Sequoia's political storm. When tech meets politics, can VCs and founders stay neutral? What happens when VCs become political players or founders become activists? And where do we draw the line? Or should there be a line? Hi everyone, and welcome to a new episode of the VC React podcast. Every week, we bring you insights and reactions from top VCs, LPs, and angel investors reacting to the latest news on startups, VCs, and investment rounds. Let's jump into it with our amazing guests for today. Chada Benmahcene, CEO of ENTROGX Ventures, co-founder at Women Collective, and among the top 50 most influential women in Dubai. Rummana Dada, managing partner at Vitality Capital, co-founder at Women Collective, and a SharkTank investor, a tough one. And my co-host, Jamie Lane from FWDstart. In the video description, you can find more details on our guests, the LinkedIn profiles, and links to their companies' websites.
We're also delighted to welcome our new presenting sponsor, milkstraw.ai. Great founders build world-changing companies, and they do it by being relentlessly efficient. They obsess over every dollar spent, and the smartest investors back the ones who make every resource count to drive the biggest outcomes. That's why so many founders use milkstraw.ai. It finds hidden savings in your AWS bills, sometimes up to 75%, freeing up capital for growth, hiring, or simply building faster. See how much you could save in 60 seconds and how much further your runway can go at milkstraw.ai.
This episode is brought to you by Okta, the AI-powered finance automation platform built for modern businesses. Managing receivables is not one task. It's dozens of repetitive ones. Correcting invoice details, updating PO numbers, following up on payment status. It's operationally critical, but painfully manual.
Okta changes that. It helps you automate your financial operations, starting with accounts receivable, so you can focus on what you're actually good at, growing your business. From contract to cash, Okta's AI agents handle everything: invoice creation, reminders, dispute resolution, payment tracking, reconciliation, even financing. You don't need to learn how to use Okta. Okta learns how you work. It adapts to your SOPs and existing workflows to get the job done. Finance teams at Cream, Lean Technologies, and Outgram rely on Okta to reduce admin time, speed up collections, and unlock cash flow.
If you've heard of them before, you know that they used to say 100 companies use Okta. The number is now 500. They are moving fast. And that kind of growth only happens because the problem is real and the solution actually works. Automate the finance work that slows you down. See how at weareokta.com. Our weekly news are brought to you by FWDstart, a twice-weekly newsletter that breaks down what's happening in the MENA startup, VC, and tech space. Hi, Jamie. It's a heavy episode, let's say. Where do you want to start?
It is a heavy episode, but look, let's maybe start with something relatively lighter, or at least interesting to discuss in many respects, which is, I think we've spoken a lot over the course of the life cycle of this podcast of, I think, food delivery, quick commerce, especially in the Saudi context, and when we're going to see consolidation as far as it's concerned. And whilst we haven't seen domestic consolidation, it's rather we've seen an acquisition in the pursuit of expansion. And in this context, we have Jahez, of course, publicly traded. In a Saudi context, they have acquired approximately a 76% stake in Snoonu, which is the leading e-commerce and delivery platform in Qatar. So this is for $245 million. So a hefty acquisition, one of the largest, I suppose, that we've seen in many respects in the region for a startup. And it values Snoonu at about $320 million post money, giving it, if we want to convert into Qatari Riyal, we've a $1 billion, $1 billion Qatari Riyal valuation. So if we want to measure it by that yardstick, we could maybe call it a Qatari unicorn to a certain extent. Maybe not in the truest sense, but we could stretch
Actually,
it.
the founder mentioned multiple times that he wanted to create the first Qatari Riyal unicorn in Qatar, and he did that. So
he did
congrats.
that as well. Massive congrats.
Manifestation in action, right?
Yes, exactly.
100%.
And who would have thought out of Qatar, to be honest? I think that's the kind of reality. And Jahez needed to do something, right? Kita coming in from China is really blowing up the market. And this was, I think, a really interesting kind of sly underdog move, if I want to say, because everyone was wondering who their acquisition would be to bolster their capability. So I think it's very interesting.
By the way, I love the name. Snoonu or Snoonu is the name of a bird in Arabic, طير Snoonu.
I think that's all of it actually when it comes about Snoonu, when it comes about the acquisition coming actually from another neighbor, I would say kind of like market. This all tells us about kind of like something around the new founders here in the region where they're really kind of like, embedding the local market and embedding the local, I would say, and the identity as well. So this is if it tells us something, it tells us also about the maturity of the founders that we're seeing actually in our region.
Yeah, I think that's a really good word, maturity, because that's always been the problem with M&A, right, in this region. And I've been working on trying to get more M&A happening for a long time. But the individual founder ego, I think, has been a real problem in the region for that. So this, I think, is brilliant. I mean, it is Jahez, so perhaps it's not comparable to other M&As happening. And obviously, Jahez is a leader and is kind of somewhat seen as, is it really a startup unicorn, because it, had a very different background and story. But yet, I think it's absolutely positive news from a cross-border perspective, and having the idea that for international investors to start coming into the region, this kind of cross-border collaboration is super fundamental.
Jamie, I think you also have some numbers on their performance so far. Can you share those?
Yeah, absolutely. So from a GMV perspective, $376 million in 2024, which is more than triple their 2022 levels, posted a net profit of 27 million Qatari Riyal and EBITDA of 54 million Qatari Riyal for the year as well. And look, all the more impressive, you mentioned at the start, Ahmed, in terms of the limited VC funding that they've raised, 17 million across 2 rounds, and no real traditional VC on the cap table, which should be mentioned as well. Obviously, it's Qatar Development Bank, and I've seen Ahmad Al-Hajri, the founder, sort of at pains to mention that that they don't have a traditional VC on the cap table, because in reality there was no one really in Qatar to fill that void on one level. Obviously, things have changed recently. We've seen sort of an influx of VCs in the region, be it Golden Gate, Atypical Ventures, etc. And there's been a real push from QIA as far as that's concerned, from sort of a fund of funds perspective, to sort of catalyze the domestic VC landscape. And it kind of reminds me a small bit of the sort of hunger station acquisition by Delivery Hero to a certain extent, in that, it's going to, Snoonu will continue to operate under its own brand post-acquisition, and Al-Hajri is going to remain on, and he retains his own 23.44% ownership stake as well. It's going to be a new board of directors be formed, but very much still a colossal amount of skin in the game.
This morning, I wanted to check if the price of Jahez changed after this news. It didn't, for some reason. I don't know why. But anyway, let me start with this. So a $320 million valuation for a company with almost the same amount in GMV. So this is kind of a 1x GMV multiple for the valuation of the company, $7.4 million in net profits. This is around 50x net profit valuation. Believe it or not, this is the global average price multiple for food delivery companies, like 1x GMV and 50x net profit. So this is average. But the question is here, is that a smart buy, or did Jahez just overpay to grab market share in Qatar, because this is a MENA company, not a global company? What do you think?
In my view, look, it's the only profitable company in this space, and it is really hard to get to profitability. I think when you look at Snoonu a little bit further, also there's some various elements of their business They do flowers, they do a number of other subsectors and verticals. And some of the technology that they've built, particularly around logistics, I think is really interesting. So I think without being able to look at the fundamentals of those other things, it seems to me that there are other elements of that business that are perhaps so valuable that effectively, nets off the purchase price. But again, as you said, it's not really dissimilar from global valuations in this space anyway, and it is the only profitable. There are very few companies in this kind of market that are profitable. I mean, Genie is another really good example. Even though it's much smaller scale, it's been profitable for over 5 years. So these kinds of businesses where their fundamentals are really good are really interesting ones to buy because they're doing something really well. And if Jahez can plug in its scale engine into that, I think you could have a brilliant combination.
I think also when it comes to that, and you mentioned actually, Ahmed, that this is usually kind of like, the normal when it comes to this sector, but then it's also around kind of like market capture, right? So basically, exactly as you said, it's like in the MENA region, but Jahez wants to make sure that they are leading as well, actually, against the other basically kind of like competitors in the region. And Qatar, and the fact that Snoonu is actually dominating, of course, in Qatar, and as Rummana said, not just in the food, but actually maybe more as a super app when it comes to that. So this is a very good opportunity for Jahez to kind of like, comes in and get it in place. And I think the second basically point when it comes to that also is we're seeing actually, maybe in other sectors, not in this, but we're seeing now coming up with the hype of AI and so on, it's more a war of talent as well, and acqui-hire. But this was not. It just Jamie was mentioning that they're basically keeping the team, and we'll see how exactly they're going to structure that. But I think also it's from that perspective that they also wanted the talent and the market share as well.
Last week, we talked about Ninja raising $250 million. It's not the exact same industry, but it's very similar. Snoonu only raised $17 million over 5 years, and then they got acquired for $320 million. How does a low margin business, like a delivery business, grow that big, that fast, with so little capital? What did they get right that others didn't?
The technology in these companies is really fundamental. And I think if they can get their tech stack right, they can get the product market fit right. Because I think with Snoonu, something that we should highlight is that the numbers also reflective of the spending power in Qatar, right? So that's a really good reflection of the amount of money that Qataris are spending on these sorts of apps. And just to broaden that, as we said, it's beyond just, we said food, right? What they've done is created a kind of a single super app, which actually, if you think about it, Jahez hasn't done yet. And I think the kinds of companies in this space that are doing really well are those that are able to capture the opportunities in the market. Careem is another good example. So if we take Careem, once they'd sort of lost the ride-hailing part of the business to Uber, I think the parts of the business that have really picked up in terms of revenue and scale are things like FX, sending money home, so blue-collar workers, and especially to countries like, interestingly, India and the UK. And I think you're seeing these kinds of other super app services becoming fundamentally important in enabling these companies to scale from a revenue perspective and also from a margin play. They're able to find these eccentricities or nuanced businesses which are picking up the revenue for them.
I was chatting with a friend from Qatar yesterday about this, and he mentioned that Snoonu was very creative. In Qatar, it's too hot. And one of the years it got really too hot, even for Qatar standards. And what happened was the government prevented or issued a law that no one can work on scooters or motorcycles between like 12 to 4 p.m. And Snoonu, what they did, they started a fleet of cars so that they can deliver in that time period, which is the lunch period. But this gives me the idea that they have really good funding, but they didn't compared to other companies. I'm still confused. How did they grow that fast, made all these achievements with such little funding? Chada, what do you think?
We'll have to ask them this question, I think, for sure. But the second thing here, I think it really goes back to what I said at the beginning, which is the maturity of the founders. What you just said, right? Which is on creativity and on finding solutions of basically being very, very capital efficient. And this is exactly what we need, right? Capital efficient to get you into B rounds, capital efficient to get you into exit, capital efficient to get you into the next milestone, whatever it is, right? And how did they that, or basically what exactly they got kind of like, to help them with? I think it's first the nature of the market. again, Qatari market, as Rummana mentioned earlier, is having a very strong purchase power for the clients themselves. So they should have like, good revenue. And we said that actually earlier. On top of that, the Qatari market itself is not that big. It's not very, very big in terms of numbers, as in kind of like, who they are serving. So that actually, this kind of like duality that they have enough cash as revenue, but then also the end user basically is not kind of like, very fast. Or it's not even, by the way, it's not even kind of like, in so many cities, by the way. Like Qatar is really, how Qatar is, right? Like you have Doha mainly. So the distance is actually making it also very easy for them to give a quality service, not just kind of like, service, but a quality service. And you mentioned it, they actually moved from scooters to cars. So I think the nature of the Qatari ecosystem in itself and the Qatari market, right, actually made it possible for them to kind of like think creatively, to kind of like find solutions, to push beyond kind of like just the capital, I would say, kind of like hinder that usually is for the other startups. And it worked well. So kudos.
This is such a great story for people who want to enter into Qatar, and so few people want to enter into Qatar. They're so reserved about this subject, but this is perfect proof that absolutely in a small market, exactly, and so well put, Chada, the duality of their purchasing power and their small sort of area radius that they have makes it a perfect market for you to scale. And again, coming back to this is where I think the winner has been the fact that they've layered so many different products onto the same consumer. One of the opportunities actually that India has done really well is embedded finance. And this is another new opportunity that I'm actually working with a startup called Knight FinTech, and it's India's top embedded finance player. And we've just brought them to the region, and we're talking to commerce players like, the likes of a Jahez or a Kareem, let's say, as an example, or a Genie. And what we're saying is that here is another opportunity for you to layer onto those same customers new revenue. And effectively, the way it works is that it gets the customer habits, it understands it because it knows who these customers are, they're purchasing, they're ride hailing, etc. It qualifies those customers and then offers them pre-qualified personal loans, car loans, etc., potentially even mortgages through the app in a very subtle way. These are new sources of revenue streams that these sorts of apps can leverage to bump up their margins significantly. And so again, I think pick a small market, double down on multiple products, user stickiness, user loyalty, customer experience, as Chada said, and I think you could have a brilliant product in a small market like Qatar.
Makes complete sense. Okay, Jamie, take us from FoodTech to PropTech, which could be the new FinTech. I don't know. Tell us what's happening there.
Could be, and I mean, look, to Rummana's point, I mean, everything will have an embedded finance layer of some description. Eventually, inevitably, every platform becomes a fintech platform sooner rather than later. So, yeah, Husby. I mean, look, a common gripe that I think people have with startups, maybe from the region, is they don't build with a sort of global ambition in mind, and Husby certainly doesn't ascribe to that. They've been very globally minded from the very beginning, entering Spain back in 2022 when they raised their 37 million Series A, and they've just followed that up, announcing this week 59 million Series B, led by Baldwin Capital, HQ'd in London, of course, PKXV Partners, formerly Sequoia India, and a host of others. It's founded back in 2020 by Jad Antoun and Khalid Ashmawi. Khalid has subsequently stepped away from the company, I believe, a year or two back. In terms of what Husby does, just for context, if you're unfamiliar, provides real estate agents and mortgage brokers with high commissions, tech, sort of just a unified infrastructure to serve buyers and sellers more efficiently. Claims to be the UAE's largest mortgage platform, processing nearly 1 in 3 home loans. And as mentioned, Spain has sort of been their European beachhead since 2022. I think the strategy they've adopted there has been super interesting, even in identifying Spain. I'm here in Spain at the moment, as it so happens, and they're, it's incredibly fragmented, I suppose, real estate market from a real estate agent perspective as well. Super low barrier to entry from a real estate agent perspective. Like there's no license required to the best of my knowledge. I think there's 100,000 plus real estate agents in the space, and they've gone for the kind of mid-tier cities as well. So as opposed to going for Barcelona and Madrid, they kind of have pursued like Valencia, where I think they are, I think, among the within the top 3 players by transaction volume there, Alicante, etc. as well. So it's one of those places, super fragmented, but really high volume on an annual basis. And with this particular capital, it seems like Saudi is an area where they're doubling down on from a GCC perspective. But yeah, it's something that's heating up. Obviously, we've seen Naui recently as well, and they made an acquisition this week to enter into the UAE. So it's an exciting time for PropTech.
I don't know why they're doing this, starting in Dubai, then Spain, then Saudi. There's fierce competition everywhere. They dominated Dubai, it seems. They're claiming that nearly 1 in every 3 homes or home loans in the UAE go through them. That's huge. But is mortgage infrastructure really that defensible? I mean, they finance through banks and they have the bank logos on their website.
It's a very good question, and especially that you actually asked, Ahmad, is it defensible? And also, actually, not just the defensible part, but because could be replicated everywhere. It's the differences between the GCC market and Europe market when it comes to that specifically. It's the consumer's culture and how the consumer looks into it. Again, we're in a place basically over GCC here where not only the local population actually comes and wants to kind of like, have home loans, but now we're having like investors from outside coming into the region through that. So that's actually something which is different from the European market. You don't have that actually as much. I know now with the golden visas and so on, it's actually coming more and more, but it's not as popular in Europe. So we'll see. It will be interesting to see exactly how are they going to, I would say, position in that market and kind of like really getting it in there. And the other side, when it comes to defensibility, it's about the cultural nuances as well of the end user and how do they look into houses and all, right? As Jamie mentioned, since basically it's going to Spain and Alicante and so on, a lot of those places are actually kind of like, tourism places on the Mediterranean and so on. And the kind of like, again, people who actually like, might get a loan over there for a house would be completely different from actually the type of people who would get a loan here in Dubai. So it would be really interesting to see how exactly do they plan to do that. I think from technology perspective as IP, if we're talking about defensibility when it comes to tech stack, I don't think it's going to be that much of kind of like, issue when it comes to specifically the tech stack or changes, but it's really about the market again and the consumer culture and the behavior that's completely different. And it's interesting that they picked Spain to start with, but it will be interesting to see exactly how they're going to execute there.
I have to say, yeah, Ahmed, I mean, I spent a bit of time talking to Jad, as I do with a lot of the companies in this space. And I think he's a brilliant business that I do think is completely defensible, because ultimately what he's done, if you think about it, is he's built a business that the banks need Husby, right? For banks, it costs money to get these qualified leads, coming back to our embedded finance point, right? They need to find these ways to access these customers. And Husby, being first mover, being there for a long time, has collected all this customer data, which it can now funnel through to the banks. Now, layer on top of that, with thousands of buyers that you're funneling monthly who are pre-vetted, you're learning so much about these customers. Not only are you becoming a front office for the banks, but secondly, the technology that they've built, the APIs, the connectivity to the banks, the CRM tools, the tools for brokers, make the life of brokers so easy that brokers would much rather deal with a Husby where everything is completely online and digitized than they would directly with a bank. Let's take a third layer onto that. And the third layer is the fact that the more information that you build, and I was saying this to Chad, I said to him that, you should layer on a new product. Now, I bought one mortgage I bought this mortgage, let's say in 2022. You also know my salary, you know where I'm working. You know now that there's a new product in the market which allows me to do a buy-to-let mortgage, which would allow me to buy more properties and put them on rent. So you could just push specifically buy-to-let mortgages to me by email, and I could be sitting there buying them, taking those offers all the time.
I think, Rummana, this works in Dubai, not necessarily in Europe. We know how Europe is overregulated, and especially when it comes to personal data. So what you're saying is absolutely fantastic for our marketing here, But in Europe, I think, again, it will be interesting to see how it looks just because of the overregulation, especially banking and financing and so on. Are they going to allow them to collect all of this data or not? Yes, I totally agree when it comes to the tech stack. The tech stack is fantastic and allowing a lot of things to be able to do and harness. And again, as I mentioned, I don't think it's going to be an issue for them actually when it comes to the IP and the tech stack to kind of like just move it to Europe. But the Europe special nature, especially when it comes to overregulations and financing, I think that will be a little bit of a challenge.
I'll argue that net off the data issues with the fragmentation in those markets, and I think they still will win. Their profitability on a new market is absolutely mind-blowing. Like, I think he said that they launched 8 cities. I want to say, I have my notes somewhere here, 8 cities in Europe already. And Riyadh, they're launching 3 to 4 new cities a year. And every time they enter a new city, it takes them less than $250,000 to break even in that market in every city they've entered into, like 8 cities so far. So I think that the metrics are speaking for themselves. And having lived, in London, in Europe a lot of my life, I have to say, when it comes to buying and mortgages, it is still very fragmented and it is still really difficult and it is still definitely open for digitization. So I think this is one where we might see a Middle East startup actually create significant waves globally and become a really big global player. A bit like, I want to put Club into this conversation. I think Club is another one that has done well. And if they move fast enough and aggressively enough in certain European markets, I think we could have some incredible Middle East companies. Oh, third one actually in that category, Flowered. Brilliant companies that we've built in the region that I think are better than anything else in Europe. By the way, this is where what we should be doing is I'm talking to the founders, but I should be pushing them to give us tickets for Women Collective. We should be getting our women tickets and we're forgetting to do this one.
100%.
Please give us some.
We need some, this is an ideation
100%.
session, Ahmed.
Okay.
Absolutely.
To wrap up the story on Husby, let me ask this. So in the GCC, or general MENA, we've seen waves. Like fintech was the most attractive industry for VCs, or it was the darling of VCs for a while. Then FoodTech, and now it feels like PropTech is king. Of course, AI is the buzzword and it's embedded in all of these. But we're talking about industries. How many PropTech startups does a market really need? And what's beyond mortgages and listing and real estate agent software? What real painful real estate problems are still unsolved and worth building for in MENA or globally?
I think that what Husby is building is different from what everyone else is. So if we look at the prop tech platforms that we have today, we have Stake, we have a few others, Smart Crowd, all around this idea of helping people to fractional real estate. That's kind of been, I think, the key thing that's been happening. I think we're going to see a lot more coming up in property management. I think that you see, the thing with property is that there are still many facets of it, and it is a huge industry. I mean, for the majority of people who came to Dubai, they made their money in property, right? And actually, most of the wealth generated is still in this space. But we have so little tech digitization in this asset class. Actually, if you think about it, real estate is really the last major asset class to get digitized here in the region. There are facets of it, not as many as perhaps in some other spaces, but there are definitely facets. I think Husby is doing the mortgage, the brokers, the buying, that part really well. I think that there are other areas, like I said, property management, definitely. And I think fractional real estate is still different and interesting and for a different type of consumer. And so I do think there is space. I think Husby is absolutely defensible and has its own. And Smart Crowd, Stake, these ones, maybe there'll be a bit more of M&A activity or there's still a little bit of fragmentation in that market. But I think we have capacity. And also, again, a lot of these have still not moved out of Dubai or even, the UAE. There's still a lot of opportunity for them to go. Riyadh is a new opening property market, finally opening properly for international investors. So I think you'll see a lot of opportunity for our Dubai-based founders to start expanding there. Also, there's a number that are coming out of Saudi. So again, these are all new markets where property ownership is just opening up. So I think we still have a long road of innovation to happen here.
Chada, what do you think? What else can startups focus on in real estate or in PropTech?
The new type of entrepreneurs that we're seeing here, or the new type of actually even just users and investors that are coming to the region, are looking for quick ROI, sustainable and digitized. So as much as we can to allow that, that will be definitely I would say appreciated. It's also, we've seen actually the trend of tokenization, Web3 tokenization of real assets. The governments themselves are actually getting into that as well. UAE government being a leader and pioneer when it comes to that. And I think we're going to see more and more and more of tokenization of real estate assets, because this is also something that the region all in all is actually kind of like supporting and pushing when it comes to that.
A gentle plug as well. If anyone is interested in particularly in the build to rent opportunity in a Saudi Arabian context, I've been writing about Flow, Adam Newman's second act in Riyadh this week. So feel free to check that out on FWDstart to see how he's managed to raise a $300 million real estate fund from 33 different Saudi family investors. So if Adam Newman is involved, that'll give you a pretty good idea of the opportunity.
Yeah, just think about the size of the Saudi market, right? It's so much opportunity to build, like beyond our imagination. So I think lots of opportunity to come construction tech. The AI still has so much application, pricing, optimization, valuations, property management. I think, again, as I said, is completely untouched as an area. So, so much to do. Most real estate firms are still using, and most developers are still using Excel to manage. And in fact, somebody said this to me. I was talking to them that they're looking to launch an AI platform for property management. And he said, if you think about it, most tenants, when they leave their property, they would have known they're going to leave 3 months before. The notice would have been given 3 months before. But the landlord cannot do anything or hardly does anything until the tenant actually leaves. What if there was a way for them to reach people? And there are people that are only planning to move in 3 months' time. They could connect them directly to the market. So bypassing also brokers, I think there's going to be a lot of that. Like Emaar is creating its own tools, right? Where there's a new technology that will allow it to effectively access customers directly. I think you'll see a lot more of that happening also.
Let's move to something different this time, deep tech, and specifically contact lenses. What's happening, Jamie?
Yeah, as a contact lens wearer with contact lens in right now,
Okay.
I cannot imagine having a smart contact lens. Like my regular contact lens, they're uncomfortable enough.
Oh wait,
So
is it colored? So maybe your eyes are not blue?
no, they are. These are my natural. Jeez, thanks so much.
I'm with you on this one, Jamie. I cannot stand wearing contact lenses.
Oh man, like as in like they irk my eyes to
That's
like
why
no
I have
end.
glasses on.
I used to wear them for like maybe 3-4 years, but then I did the LASIK.
One day. But in any case, Expansio think that this is the route forward. So forget about your Meta Ray-Bans. They have apparently raised a $250 million Series A to build their smart contact lenses. You said off the top, Ahmad, you've like AR functionality, you've real-time health monitoring, computing, all from within the eye. And this is as per Bloomberg. The round was led by Opportunity Venture Asia. I don't have a ton of context on this particular backer. Truth be told, seems to be Hong Kong based. I've reached out to them for clarity on this. Like whenever I see a $1.35 billion valuation with limited information on the company's product and also who's backed it, I'm always a bit skeptical. But in any case, we'll take it at face value from what Bloomberg have reported. Founded only back in 2021. It's a Russian entrepreneur, Rummana Dada, and then it's a Ukrainian physicist, Valentin Valkov. It claimed that it developed a couple of different prototypes, clinical trial ready model by the end of 2026, allegedly. Look, it's interesting. I think worth discussing certainly the idea itself. And whether or not it has legs versus, and how comfortable people would be. How comfortable would you be with it's kind of Black Mirror-ish.
Okay.
I think it's something that obviously the market is going to tell us how actually, like, when it comes to are people really adopting it or not, the technology. But I think it's something that we will actually see more of. I mean, you see where, like, again, AI is getting, we're seeing basically, yes, the metaverse was not that much of a success earlier, or kind of like, the meta glasses, but these are different. This is not a heavy hardware. This is something that's actually like very small, very light, and yet it provides value in terms of kind of technology. I think definitely the fact that they are also after they are raising actually that big of a Series A, the investors have like so much confidence, I would say, in terms of kind of where this technology is going. And I always
Oh,
think
they're really
that the
good
technology,
salespeople. It's either
sorry?
investors have a lot of confidence or the startup has a like amazing sales team that knows how to like sell their story really well, right?
Yeah, and
Of
we've
course,
had
of course.
examples of these internationally. Like I remember the company that did AR with the whale video. They raised so much money from the top VCs, but then the company didn't do anything.
I mean, yeah, we always have that, definitely. I mean, storytelling, of course, you cannot convince anyone if you don't have a really strong storytelling team and sales team. We'll totally agree. I think I was just going to say also that the fact that this is also something close to basically what has been promised in terms of we're going to have the technology getting cheaper and cheaper. And with the technology itself getting cheaper, as in hardware, as in kind of like, you know, the Moore's law that we all know when it comes to the deep tech, as the deep tech technology gets cheaper, we will be able to do more and more through it. So this is why I'm thinking that this could have a high future, but the market again is going to tell us in terms of like adoption. Are we really going to see the adoption necessary for this or not?
You know what I think this one is? I think it's what we call these moonshot investments, right? If they're able to do it and they're able to get this to market at the scale that it needs to happen, it's going to be transformational in the market. And if they don't, then it's, joins the ranks of the other ones, which are high risk and, no return deep tech ventures. But honestly, if you think about everything that's happening in the kind of biotech or AI or any of these spaces, frankly, and to be fair to them, you do need that much money to be able to make this really work and to be able to make it scale. They have first mover advantage. I think it's a brilliant product. And I think, Chada, what you said is so right. I was out at the Virgin store this weekend with my daughter. I realized that's a great place to keep her busy and walk around because there's just so much tech for her to see and experience. And they had the new VR glasses and the prices dropped to, I mean, the lower model was 1,500 dirhams, but the top model was 3,000 dirhams. Like super accessible. We both put it on and we just connected it to our phone and we were able to watch a movie completely in AR VR. And my daughter was like, so we don't need a TV anymore? We can just like sit on our couch and watch this? And I was like, yeah, should we get rid of our TV? She was like, no, not ready for that, Mom.
Actually, Rummana, this is a perfect segue for my next question. What would something like this replace? Is it the phone, the smart
TV.
glasses, the TV,
I think it's a TV.
watches? I don't know. Everything is on your eyes, like in your face. What else do you need?
You're right, though, because they say, I think the story is that it would replace telephones, headsets, and glasses for this one. And that should be the goal. That's what we were promised, right, by like Meta when it first started, but it didn't really happen. So, I mean, we're all waiting for that to happen. And I think, why not? Like, I already go out, like most of us, just with our phone. I genuinely don't really use the TV that much anyway, because when it moved to internet, I don't have terrestrial TV because I just use the internet. So I think things are shifting this way and I don't see why. I mean, I'm not uncomfortable with it. I don't know about any of you. Would you be comfortable with it? I wear contact lenses.
I would use it maybe for a few hours a day, especially if it's thin enough that wouldn't affect my eyes. Yeah, I would use it.
I think it's the data processing and privacy. I think that's the biggest thing on one level, isn't it? In terms of
Always the dilemma, right?
Everyone. All the wearable technologies have this aspect of kind of like, personal data and processing and so on. But in terms of, is it going to make your life easier or not as a person? I think it will. So that's kind of like, the question that we need to kind of like put in place in here. Now, is it also accessible or not? As we were saying, definitely it will be. If it's not even today, it will be because, again, technology gets cheaper. Now, how are they going to sustain the developments with the demand, right, when it comes to that? And with the quality, of course, you don't want to get something as lenses in your eyes and then you don't get the quality of what you're looking for as well. So it's really a mix of like, okay, I am providing personal data. I'm kind of putting myself out there. Am I really getting something out of it or not? So what are they going to show me, right? So I think this is also the question that comes in. What is it going to replace? The question of what is it going to replace? I honestly think that TV is already being replaced, honestly. I don't think like any house is really kind of like using TV as we used to before. And that's because of some other stuff, which is like new media and social media and so on and so forth. Now, when it comes to phones and when it comes to kind of like those kind of screens, that is interesting. Like, is it really going to kind of like, instead of us having our phones or something, we just like do it directly? That would be a real question to kind of like see exactly how we're going to fold.
Speaking of TV, Every time I say I don't want to watch TV anymore, a new show, sci-fi show on Apple TV drops in, and I'm like, I have to watch it on a big screen. And I can't wait until tomorrow because they're dropping season 3 of Foundation, which, in my opinion, the best sci-fi show ever created. Anyway,
Akras,
go ahead,
no
Rummana.
way. I worked on Foundation. The
Yeah,
TV series.
I know. Yeah. You told me that. Yeah. I think it's the best show ever.
I really enjoyed it. Season 2 is super good. So yeah, I highly recommend it. Unfortunately, I worked
I'll
on
add it
season
to
1.
my list apparently.
Okay, let's move to the last story in our show today. It's a bit controversial. It's politics meeting tech and venture capital. Jamie?
Yeah, Sean McGuire is being racist again.
Do you know, I wanted to say something on the last topic, but I wasn't sure if it was too controversial, but maybe I'm going to say it now. I had this conversation with a colleague of mine, and I said to him, why aren't you using the wearables and why aren't you using ChatGPT Premium? He said, because of the data. And I was like, yeah, I get it. But as Chada said, it makes our life much more efficient. We're able to have more data to do what we want to do much more efficiently, whether it's our health or our work. And he says, yeah, but imagine that they just wanted to wipe out all people of my particular origin overnight. They would have all the data. And he's a medical surgeon, I want to say. Hopefully he doesn't watch this and know that I said it. And I said to him, but I mean, that's the thing. And I guess it's coming back to, your point about what's happening and this comment and, how do we feel about it is really interesting. I think it's a chance.
So Rummana, can you give us like a quick summary of what really happened?
Yeah, so the Sequoia partner effectively made racist comments, exactly as Jamie said, again. And
yeah,
I think
love how you put it. He's just like, shouting being racist again.
Yeah, I love that too. And I think this time what happened, which is fantastic, everyone stood up, just like they're all doing in the streets of New York. All the youth, it's like this revolt happening. And, the youth, the Gen Zs, and then we're going to have our Gen Alphas who are like double, I would say, anything that our Gen Zs were today. They do not stand or tolerate anything. And this voice, what I love this time is that the Middle East tech founders, those who were invested in from Sequoia before it changed to a different name, the Indian version of Sequoia, they've all stood up and said, we have your money, but we're not going to be quiet. We're going to speak up. This is absolutely unacceptable, and that you have a responsibility. Because I think the concern that has come up is if he's able to say things like that out loud, what does that mean about the way that he thinks when he is considering founders? Is there a bias innately, which no doubt this demonstrates that there is? So how many founders have not been invested in by either US funds because of this inherent racist mentality? And that is the problem, I think, fundamentally.
The whole Sequoia thing is bringing up a bigger topic, like the intersection of technology and politics. We're in a world where founders, investors, and engineers are no longer, neutral players. Their political views, affiliations, or even tweets sometimes can spark real consequences, can get them fired, or can prevent them from getting an investment from a big company. For their companies,
or make them more powerful,
or make them more powerful.
Yeah,
like Elon Musk,
Mr. Musk and Trump having that little ego fight, right? Who's more powerful, the guy who runs the economy or the guy who wants to run the economy?
Who runs the country? Yeah.
Yeah, I think on the case of the case of Elon Musk is quite different, I would say, and quite kind of like its own case in a way or another, really. But back to the just the topic really quickly. I think what's happening here with Sequoia and with the Middle Eastern founders and why did they voice it out is because, again, our market is maturing. And we've seen kind of like the interest from international investors to actually come in the region and kind of like establish, even again with a local brand and so on and so forth, exactly what Sequoia happened. But also the local money is actually growing, and we're seeing Series B and great Series A coming actually from the region. So we're not anymore kind of like this unknown region that's actually just like, let me throw in any comments and it's not going to backfire or not going to kind of like find it. As I really liked what Fadi Ghandour basically said and he's the one who actually really started the singularity. He was like, if you want to engage, we're very welcome to engage with us and to engage with everyone, right? We're very open. But this does not happen with such racist comments that actually might kind of like hint into also biases, as Rummana said, in the actions. Because today you start with just words, tomorrow you do something else, right? And this is kind of like, why we want to make sure that, especially in tech and especially in such a field where innovation and tech needs everyone, needs basically the inclusivity of opinions, the inclusivity of backgrounds, the inclusivity of races, right? What you were saying earlier, it's so important, especially nowadays. We cannot just kind of like throw this here and there and kind of like, and let it go, as I mentioned. Now, when it comes to, should we talk about politics? Should we not? As our founders kind of like, getting into that. I think Elon Musk is kind of like, a special case into all what's happening. So that's kind of like one thing. But all in all, for founders, I don't believe the fact that you are a person, you're kind of like, out of a context. You are part of a context, right? Whether this context is actually your market ecosystem, your industry, your background, whatever it is, you are part of a context and you just need to embrace it. Now, how do you choose to voice it? People do it in different ways. And of course, there are kind of like right ways to voice it and there are wrong ways to voice it as well, right? And I think this is really the line where you need to choose from. It's not the line of, should I basically embrace it and show it or not? But it's actually the line of, how do I show it and how do I voice it? I voice it with respect. I voice it with a tone that's basically always inclusive and respectful. It's not kind of like, illegal or kind of like harming any of the laws of any country, especially the countries that I'm operating in, and so on. But then also, you cannot just remove yourself as a founder from a context where you are from. And this is kind of like,
we always say
really why
that
I
we
like
in tech
VCpreneur.
live in our own bubble, but at the end of the day, we are part of these societies. Let's take it back to
one point. Sorry, just one point to Chada's point of inclusivity. I think this was brilliant because the inclusivity point is actually exactly the reason that like Chada and I are so passionate about Women Collective. Whether it's inclusivity about race, culture, ethnicity, or gender, the point that we always try to make is how can a small percentage of the population of a particular gender, particular ethnicity make decisions on a product that you want to be available for 100% of the population? Impossible. And historically, I don't know how many people know this, but the stats are quite scary that women are 17% more likely to die in a car crash because the car crash dummies were created around the body shape of a man, that women body police armor was not created around the body type of a woman, and so women police officers are more likely to die in an incident. I mean, it's pretty scary that the office temperatures, the temperature of an office, an average office, is set to 5 degrees too cold for a woman. So affects her hormonally, her cognitive performance also. So the point is, inclusivity is fundamentally important in order to exactly create true innovation and solutions that really better our world and that are for all of us. And I think that's a very important point.
I fully agree. If you are in the shoes of the other partners in Sequoia, what would you suggest? Sequoia or others, like a VC partner in your firm did something. How should a VC firm deal with that?
In my view, if you're a VC, particularly given that many American funds are now coming to the Middle East for funding, so let's just take it from their own selfish objectives of, we want to access funding from the Middle East, we want to access universal funding from the world. Well, in which case, firstly, we need to make sure that we're representing ourselves as focused on returns. And focused on returns means that we should not get involved in stating comments politically or otherwise that could show to be non-inclusive. I think that's number one. Number two, let's take it outside of the returns point, and let's just say, and outside of the idea that they want to pick up LPs from the region. Let's focus on the fact that they're just a fund that should be a fund that focuses on returns, and in which case, again, their objective must be to find and identify the right founders. By any of my partners stating an opinion that suggests that we are not inclusive in any way, shape, or form, or that we dislike a particular race or ethnicity, it again tells me that we are not completely unbiased in our perspectives, which means that we are not able to choose the best founders to invest in. So my advice to my fellow partners is that we're in the business of making money. We're in the business of choosing the best founders to do that and the best startups to do that. And it doesn't matter to us whether they're men, women, Muslim, Jewish, Christian, and that should be my objective, and all partners should act in that way.
Chada?
I totally agree with what you said, Rummana. And I think basically, first of all, if I was basically a partner in Sequoia or something happens actually similar, first of all, I would do what basically the signatory and what the form says, right? They're actually asking for an apology and kind of like at least denouncing those comments, because it's in a way or another is basically kind of like an image of the firm as well. And as you mentioned, if they are operating in here and looking basically for LP and money, then there is this fraction that's actually really happened, this friction, sorry, that's actually really happening between a culture, an entire culture that you really, I would say, attacking, and basically with the premise that you are coming. It's really conflicting, right? And that's very important that at least you denounce it and you kind of like, say, we're here to make sure that actually we build with the region, right, to kind of like get to basically where we want as a win-win. And if you are not kind of like coming with a partnership mentality, then you're really kind of like creating a wall, right, between you and those founders and those basically ecosystem players in that perspective. So that's actually very, very important. And again, because again, as I mentioned earlier, it really reflects, and that bias would see and would show in the actions. It's not just about the words, it's not just about the tweets, it's about actually how you choose. And as Rummana said, where do you put your money afterwards? Are you really going to kind of like, not see just actually from your ROI perspective, then you're going to see into which culture you're coming from and which basically races you're coming from or not. And this is really kind of like, eye-opening and I would say alarming when it comes to that. So it's very important to come with the partnership mentality, with the mentality of like, we have the cultural nuances in mind, yet we're here to make basically something that's a win-win, and then we'll make it work for there. I have one example of why inclusivity actually could go into actions and could show in technology kind of like, how it really impacts. What we're doing in ENTROGX Venture Studio is basically that we're working on energy security for emerging markets, right? And what we have noticed that the technology, which is, for example, digital twin, is really built for the developed countries. It's built with like very expensive hardwares to put in place for you to actually be able just to track the machinery and to track kind of like, the energy machinery. We found out that for emerging markets where actually they cannot afford this very high kind of like, it's not even manufactured when it comes to the sensors and all, and this deep tech technology. It's not manufactured even for Africa, for example, there or something, and they would have to kind of like export it. They don't have the leverage or kind of like, the privilege of having quick, efficient digital twins for their energy efficiency, for example. And this is why we're working on AI native digital twins. You see here how the technology really switched context just because of inclusivity. We were like, okay, what does it actually make this market able to access such kind of like, technology? Let's build accordingly. So I think it's very important, again, to look and as a VC to have certain principles that you abide with, because it will not only embody in your values or in the way you talk or in the way you write your tweets again, but it will embody in your actions and basically where you put your money and your hands on as well.
I want to kind of leave us with the fact that we have some brilliant founders coming out of the region who are going to be raising internationally. And I think for any international VC, it is super important that they remain effectively neutral, again, on such political issues in order to attract those big opportunities. Emerging markets present an enormous opportunity. And I think that's, a fundamental kind of leaving point that I want to add, that neutrality is important to retain objectivity for large VCs.
I love this episode. I feel like I can talk to you for hours, but we have to wrap it up. And before we wrap it up, a big thanks to Okta and Milkstraw for sponsoring today's episode.
If you want to get paid faster, access financing, and automate your receivable process, head to weareokta.com. That is weareokta.com, and take control of your accounts receivable today. And if your AWS bills are getting you down, check out Milkstraw. It can help you find hidden savings of up to 75%, freeing up capital for growth, hiring, or just building faster. See how much you'll save in 60 seconds at milkstraw.ai. That's milkstraw.ai.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Rummana and Chada. This has been a great episode. I really didn't feel time and would love to see you again soon.
Thank you so much for
you.
having us.
Thank you so
Thanks
much, guys.
Yeah,
again.
thank you so much,
Thanks.
Ahmad. Thank you, Jemmy. Thanks for having us.